Welcome back, y'all, to the Thunder Road podcast. It's 2:30 on Sunday, and we've got a special guest with us. It's Dr. Logan Sherman. He's a practicing chiropractor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, one of my longtime friends. Dr. Sherman is a product of Texas running. Started out at Richardson Pierce. He was an elite high school distance runner in cross country and track. Ended up graduating with PRs of about 9:05 and sub 4:20. I know. What were you, Logan? 4:15 in the mile, something like that.
4:15, 4:16. Yeah, somewhere close to that.
4:15 in the mile coming out of high school. I know he was a top 10 all-time 10K guy while we were at A&M together. 29:40 on the track. He then went on to pursue his career on the roads and ended up highlighting his career with a win at the Dallas Marathon in 2015. That was exciting for me to see, just as a friend, to see you on the front page throwing up the throwing up the ones coming down the home stretch. Yeah, man, not just an American winning it, but a product of the local area. So that was awesome for the running community. And then went on to pursue a career in chiropractic and soft tissue therapy. He holds certifications in chiropractic clinical neurology, active release technique, kinetic core functional dry needling, and Graston, along with rock tape fascial movement taping, FMT 1 and 2. So what I love about having an elite athlete turn chiro massage therapist is that they usually see things a little bit differently than someone that didn't live that lifestyle for so long and didn't, have to actually practice taking their body, to the limits and then having to deal with injuries. And they also usually kind of understand the psychology behind runners and our tendencies, that make us the way we are. And so really excited to have you on today, Logan. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks again for having me. It's fun talking with you again.
Yeah, dude. have to do this more often. So I got to ask, just to jump in here, man, and I want to kind of give the floor to you, but I got to start with just an easy one. Well, what are some of the most common things that you see in your clients that are runners, especially, that are just like easily preventable? It's like, come on, man, what are those top things that you see?
Generally what you'll see is people that start with running and they're new to running, they kind of have injuries from areas that just need some strength, need some TLC. So your plantar fasciitis, your IT band, those are the big things we see in the office, which I think are highly preventable. But people new into running, they either jump in it too fast, they don't know what to do as far as behind the scenes that we know are important. And then I also think there's the shoe wear and things like that they just aren't told. They just don't have that knowledge right off the bat. So, but then as we get into people with high mileage, we get into, your Achilles or your chondromalacia patellas and things like that, I think are just, due to high mileage, jumping up too quickly, not having a good qualified coach like yourself that walk them through a program that can kind of have them build and recover and get stronger instead of just continuing to build and then eventually break down. So we're all, injuries they happen to a lot of us. 75% of us get injured at one point or another. So it's just, but there are things we can do, and having a good coach, having somebody fit you for shoes, and having a good behind the scene part of running as far as stretching and strengthening and all that stuff. I think that really helps put people a little bit forward and in front of their injuries.
Yeah. So let's say, a lot of the people I'm working with right now are in that kind of like honeymoon stage of starting running, if you want to call it that, first year, first 2 years, it's like finally cresting 30, 40 miles a week for the first time. I know it's hard to speak in generalities with runners because they all, have their own things that make them who they are. But like, if you had to speak in generalities, it's like you want to tell that person something. What would you tell them? Like, all right, you're training for real now. This is my little pearl of wisdom,
I think trust in the process, and everything that your coach has given you. I mean, you definitely can handle, and
Hmm.
be open in your communication. I think those are the two big things that I would tell any newbie. I mean, we all think that soreness is part of the process, and of course it is. But if something's lingering, you've got to communicate that to the coach, and the coach can say, "Hey, that's nothing big. Go out and keep doing what you're doing," or "Hey, that might be something a little bit bigger. Let's back off." And I think communication is the key in any kind of program, and coming off and starting something and realizing you want to get to a sub 17-minute 5K at the end of the season. It's not going to happen in your training in the first 2 or 3 weeks. You've just got to kind of take those little small bites as you get a little further, again, that communication is key. And you might be a little bit behind at some points, but we're a continuum. We have this ability to be on pace, and we have ability to be back off pace, and I think that's important. So week 2 and 3, you might be a little bit behind. You might be ahead of your training on week 4 and 5, and then you might drop back and below. But as long as you're kind of on target, that's ultimately what the goal is. So
Totally. Totally. So, I mean, communication between you and your coach, reading your body,
exactly.
bringing what you're feeling to the forefront, and then also allowing for a little bit of error. It sounds like, as far as, don't freak out either way.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
long as we're, true north is this direction. As long as we're heading, northeast, northwest, we're kind of, in the right direction. All is good.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what, knowing what you know now, and you're kind of, talking to the, you just a second ago, you were kind of talking to that newbie athlete, so if you were thinking about yourself specifically, right as you were catching fire, your sophomore, junior year, and you kind of got the bug where it's like, man, I'm addicted to this, like I want to go further. I want to go faster. The goals start to get real and aggressive. Thinking back to those days, like, what would you have done differently to yourself, or as a, as a professional now?
I think I definitely think all of the small stuff that we were talking about earlier, the nutrition, the sleep, those things are really important. They're not like what you think of when you think about ultimately getting to your goal, but
Yeah.
your nutrition is key, your sleep is key, your stretching, your foam rolling, your strengthening, all those things that you're not doing when you're running are really important. And those are things I definitely would have focused on myself as an athlete. And those are things I think some people do really well at, and some people, we just it's not as glamorous as a 15-mile run that you just broke your 15-mile run PR or
Right.
something like that. It's just not as it's not as one of those things that you really look at as glamorous. So
Mm-hmm. The little things.
yeah.
Just
Yeah.
and I always tell my athletes, it's like, it's those little things that change trajectory, over the long term. It's like, if you make a 1% adjustment right now, it could add up to a 15% gain, 4 or 5 years from now,
Yeah.
and I know I personally, I wasn't I didn't do anything dumb as an athlete when I was that age. I was sleeping well, I was eating well, I was doing, all the right things. I definitely was on, I was pretty straight as far as all that goes. But what I didn't do well was recover, and I didn't do the little things. I didn't have a strength routine. I didn't listen to my body, honestly. I just ran it into the dirt every day,
Yeah.
and just almost, to me, it was almost like there was some kind of awesomeness about it, like that
Yeah.
was cool. Like, I ran through a lot of pain, like, what a hard ass I am, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it made me better. And I always kind of wonder, like, would my own, high level running career would have extended out further, you know, um, because my
It,
body did start to break down at about 23, 24 years old. Bones started to break, and it wasn't that I
it's
was
tough.
pushing the limits. It's just things just, yeah, it didn't continue on.
And that's the hard part is, we look at, most runners, we have this kind of personality where we're going to push ourselves as much as we can. And so if, your coach tells you, hey, I want between 18 miles and 15 miles, chances are you're going to lean towards the 18, even if you're not feeling great on that day. And I think it's really about, recovery needs to be recovery, and hard work needs to be hard work. And you see that a lot in a lot of the African workouts. They're just, they've been really keen on easy days are easy, hard days are hard. And I think that's just a little bit lost in some of the training programs we have here, and beating the snot out of your body is just not the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
you might be able to do it for a couple of years, but definitely not forever.
Yeah. And I don't know, I always wonder about where that comes from, like just the origination of it. Like, why is it in the States that you see that? Why is it in the NCAA that you see that? Because, recruiting international guys, that's the first question I get is, do you guys all train that hard in America?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, no, we recover, I promise. And everybody's got this thing about that. And it's alive and well here for sure. It's a real thing, but it's like, where did that start? Is it because it's a football culture in high school athletics, or, what is it about not wanting to rest? It seems
Yeah.
like it's got a stranglehold on the sport,
It really has. And I think a lot of it, just our everybody looks into these, metrics, and they're so into the watches, and, we want to be able to see our watch and hit a certain pace. And, some days you just need to kind of get rid of that and just kind of go for however many minutes it tells you to go for, and make it easy and make it fun. So, I think we get locked down in today's society about a lot of things, and measuring metrics and things like that.
Yeah.
Which is good for certain days, but like we said, some days just have fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Married to the watch, or slave to the watch, either way you want to see it.
Yeah.
So soft tissue therapy is a huge part of athletes staying healthy, getting the right rest, having a good plan, et cetera, all the small details. But then I think, a lot of athletes kind of reach a point in their careers where it's like, okay, now it's time for some external input, like I've got the plan, I'm doing the right things. And man, like, I'm running, 15 miles turning left every week,
Yeah.
It's time to go see a specialist, like yourself. How does a normal, high school athlete go about finding, or parent, high school parent, how do they feel good about the one they found, or how do they go about finding one? I mean, what's that process like? I've always been lucky and spoiled being in a collegiate system that we had people, that I could generally trust, but like, what kind of advice would you give there?
I think it's definitely, listening to the rest of the running community, asking questions, looking at the certification of the provider. I teach active release techniques. I think it's one of the greatest techniques out there for sports, for athletes in general, for all different sports. However, everybody's not created equal. Somebody may be certified in it, may not practice, that well. So I think getting kind of a referral or word of mouth is really one of the best things. When you're looking for somebody, sometimes you just have to go try them out and see what they do, and see, are they testing different things? Are they looking for different things? Is it just in and out? You want to make sure they're seeing the whole picture. And to me, with the rock tape and the functional movement assessments, just making sure we take a generalized look at somebody and see the whole body, and see how everybody, moves, and then focus down on the smaller stuff, and explain. You definitely want somebody that kind of explains what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish by what they're getting to. I mean, if somebody comes in and has plantar fasciitis, I'm going to probably look up into the calf, I'm going to look up into the hamstring, I may even kind of look up into the back, but I always have to let that client know why that might get tight, and how that fascia is connected underneath the foot to the calf and the Achilles and the hamstring. So you definitely want somebody that deals with athletes. You want somebody that we'll also listen to you, and you'll kind of get feedback from, if somebody is really a deep tissue massage person, and they're beating you up in the room, might not be the best thing for you. I've had patients I might have been a little too aggressive with, and we take it back the next visit and they get tremendously better from being lighter in the treatment. So, I think having somebody that does that, and really it's just probably going to be experience, looking at their credentials on their website, seeing if you can get any word of mouth from any other local running groups, and asking who goes where. And those are the big questions I generally have people ask, and that's how people find us, is referrals. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So kind of segueing in from, how do I go about finding the right one for me? You're kind of, basically saying, like, ask around, make sure that, they seem well-versed and that they're listening to you and they're invested in, who you are as a person, and figuring out the problem for you specifically.
yeah.
You know, I feel like you elaborating a little bit about your own personal, beliefs as far as treatment, maybe could be helpful as well, just for somebody out there looking for a good one.
Yeah, I think when you come into somebody's office, that first visit should be probably, I don't know how everybody schedules theirs, but in my office, 15 to 20 minutes is just sitting there talking about what's going on, talking about existing shoes, uh, w- having you bring in your shoes, looking at the wear pattern on those shoes. And then we start to break down into an assessment for about another 10 to 15 more minutes. And then we start treatment after we explain what's going on. So, there has to be that really thorough detail at the very beginning to kind of figure out what the source is. If you have a problem with your house with some plumbing, you don't want somebody just kind of swinging at drywall and starting to kind of figure out where things are coming from. You want somebody to kind of really assess before they start tearing apart the house. And that's kind of the way I look at it is, we spend most of the time up front to kind of ask the right questions, to do the right test, both, neurologic tests from that chiropractic clinical neurology, to orthopedic test. And then if need be, x-rays, MRIs, things like that, because, in reality, there's only so much we can gather. We can gather probably about 85% accuracy, and that's with a great clinician, a good diagnosis off the first treatment. And typically, if you need imaging, you can kind of go that direction. You can go MRI, x-rays. I always let people know, it's just kind of down the road, or, maybe another question you would ask, but, x-rays miss a lot of things. X-rays just tell you bone. They don't really always tell you if there's a stress fracture or a stress reaction. They can miss that quite a bit of the time. Maybe 50% of the time they'll miss an x-ray. They'll miss a fracture or a stress reaction. So, making sure that person doesn't say, hey, there's nothing on the x-ray, you're good, let's go ahead and kind of keep running. Making sure that person asks the right questions. If they need an MRI that would show exactly what was going on, they go that direction. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I think those are big things. Again, that what they do, in that room before they even touch you is really important, because that just kind of indicates where their mind's at and what they want to know and what information they're gathering.
Totally, man. Yeah. And even just as a coach, like, I'm not I don't do soft tissue therapy. I'm not necessarily fixing people, but just coaching someone. The idea of, like, a lot of times they'll paint the picture for you. A lot of times they'll feel things and kind of cue you off to what's happening. For me, it might even be just mentally, what
Yeah.
they feel like they need, a certain session, or about a course, or about a competitor. And it kind of happens, through casual conversation at the track. And it sounds like it's very similar, in the
Yeah.
clinical setting, or can be. So,
Yeah. The amount of times we've uncovered something that just, right at the beginning of the treatment, just asking the questions, and you see the wheels turning in somebody's head to be like, oh yeah, that might've been where it happened. So,
yeah.
they don't know that off the bat. So I think just kind of walking people through it, and then, fixing them so they can get out there and conquer the world.
So I get a lot of questions about mechanics. Um, a lot of kids will come to me after maybe we do a testing. And for those of y'all listening out there that don't know, I do athlete testing, where we go through a whole bunch of different metrics and we figure out how you're wired. And we look for kind of the low hanging fruit in your athletic profile. And one of the most common questions I get after we finish, and I do a little mechanical analysis, we're looking at ground contact times and force and power and all the, fun geeky stuff that you try to piece together the person is, what should I change about my mechanics, coach? Like, how do I change that? And I never dive in to specific mechanical details with them. Like, oh, you need to lift your knees more. Like I just don't do that as much as trying to give them something to maybe, make what they're currently doing better. But I'm curious to hear, like, what would you have to say to someone that came to you and said, I'm always getting tendonitis on my left, whatever, like I want to change my mechanics. Will you help me? Like, what's your response to that question? Do you entertain it? What's the comfortability level there?
I think it's really hard to change biomechanics. If you're trying to change big picture, it is the toughest thing that we find in practice. You can change really small things that make a big impact, like you were saying earlier, 1% change, making a 14-15% change over the course of their training cycle. There are definitely patients I've had that have had really good luck with some very small minor gait changes, whether that be the fact that they had a scissor gait. So, when they're running, their legs are crossing past the midline and it creates a lot of stress. And we kind of make them have an imaginary line, or they go a big trail down here in Dallas is Katy Trail, and you've got a line right in the middle, and just kind of make sure that their feet aren't crossing over the line on each side, so that they're staying kind of nice and stacked. Small things like that where they can kind of have a visual stimulus is really helpful. Those are kind of the big things that we try to change in people and try to kind of get people to improve on. But yeah, when you're trying to change things dramatically, it's really hard. Our running gait is stored in our hindbrain, in our cerebellum, and that is an unconscious, you don't even have to think about it. Obviously, if it required the thought process of running every time, it'd just be so fatiguing. So if I make somebody do a big change, by the time they get about 30-40 minutes in and they start to kind of get a little tired and their mind starts to wander, their big brain, their cortex is not going to be able to dampen and make the big changes in the cerebellum. So they're going to kind of revert back to their old practices. So it's really, you kind of have to do it small steps and small biomechanical changes, a little by little. I find if you get somebody really young, you can make a little bit bigger changes just because they are still getting these cerebellum kind of pathways fine-tuned, so they're able to be a little bit more manipulated via an adult, where it's just a little bit harder. And the best analogy I had in the clinical neurology is like, if you go home from school and you're just walking through somebody's yard and you walk through that yard every day, you create this little path in this little divot in the grass and this little rut, and it's really hard. If you've been doing that for 4 or 5 years, it's really hard to kind of change that rut and get out somewhere else. It's just kind of ingrained in you to do that, and that's the same way that these pathways are. It's easy to kind of slope off that direction you've always been doing. So the hope is we can make the change, but again, small changes kind of add up, and just you got to be patient with it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I think you and I could dive into that one and spend a whole episode on something like that.
Yeah.
Got a lot of ideas there.
I love the clinical neurology aspect of that. I mean, we do some stuff if you can get somebody on a treadmill and have them run in front of a mirror, but really, fundamentally, if you're on a treadmill, it really messes everything neurologically up. I mean, you're basically doing a slow stretch response to the hip flexors, which is going to activate them. So you're basically are turning on hip flexors when they need to be shut off, and your hip extender, your glute needs to be on. So I'm just not a big fan of trying to make those changes on a treadmill. And again, that's really the best thing for somebody if they're solo trying to make the change.
Yeah. I love it. So I got 2 more things for you. They're short. One, inserts or no inserts? Do you believe in them or not? Or are you in between?
I'm in between. My father is a podiatrist, so I do believe in them. I believe that they're helpful. I think that they are supportive in nature.
Hmm.
I think if the runner is willing to do the work, they're great because they can put them in. They can get out of discomfort. They're basically, if you think about a bridge and the bridge is collapsing, you can kind of come in and support it up and lift it up a little bit. But if somebody's doing the strengthening exercises, eventually they can get out of the orthotic. So, I think for a very short-term fix, we're basically helping that suspension bridge from the bottom with the orthotic. And then if we do the exercises, we can kind of help it from the top with all the support beams and, all that engineering junk
Yeah.
I'm trying to come up with the analogy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think if used in the right way, I think orthotics can be very beneficial. But my hope is that people do the work afterwards and during, so that they can get out of it one day.
Totally, dude. You and I, right here, man. Feel the same
Talking the
way.
world.
All right, dude. Last thing I got for you. So if there was a billboard the entire running community could see, and as they drove past on the way to work every day, and there was one thing you could tell them, just knowing what you know about the sport, what would it be?
Our coach at A&M, Dan Waters, his favorite saying was "the devil's in the details," and I think that is so fundamentally correct. And I didn't understand that back in the day, but we foam rolling, the stretching, the strength, the nutrition, all this stuff behind the scenes. I think those things are the most important things for you. And I think if you can be a really well-rounded runner by doing that, you can basically, you can kind of reach your potential, and then you can also get away from a lot of injuries that it would otherwise cause.
Yeah, devil's in the details. DW. Thank you,
Yep.
DW. I, in thinking about that, because I've thought about a lot of the things our coaches used to tell us in college, and they get smarter with age. But another thing with the devil's in the details is just the idea that like you also have to be in the right mindset to handle the details. And I
Yeah.
feel like when someone kind of makes a decision, a conscious decision that I'm going to do this right, and I'm going to do this every day, and I'm going to take care of my body, that initial commitment starts waterfalling out into other areas of their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it's the devil's in the details. It sounds so simple, but also guys realize like, if you don't have the discipline to foam roll, you also aren't going to have the discipline to get other things in your life done on time, and it's just about almost like the way you live, the devil is completely in the details, and having the power to change, and start taking care of things. So yeah, I love that. So that's a good
One
one.
of my favorite sayings.
That and stay gold, pony boy.
Yeah. Fresh as pancakes. We can
Precious
go on that forever.
pancakes. Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Well, doctor, thank you for coming on and BSing with me here about running for a little bit. We'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me.